Hello everyone and welcome to episode 50 of the Layton Fitness podcast. Now in today's episode we're going to be discussing insulin myths. Now the reason I'm discussing this is, for whatever reason, insulin seems to get a bad name within the fitness industry. There's so many myths within the fitness industry, things along the lines of you should try and control insulin throughout the day and you should spike insulin post-workout, and all these other claims that have been said. But in this episode we're going to look at the facts, what we actually need to know, and is insulin even worth worrying about. So firstly, what is insulin? So insulin is basically a hormone that regulates the levels of sugar within the blood. When you eat a meal, the carbohydrate in the meal is broken down into glucose. Glucose then enters your blood, your pancreas senses the rise in glucose and releases insulin. Insulin allows the glucose to enter your liver, muscle and fat cells. Once your blood glucose starts to come back down, insulin levels also drop down as well. The cycle continues throughout the day. Additionally, insulin can also help with muscle protein synthesis, which is obviously a big positive. Insulin inhibits lipolysis, which is breakdown of fat, and stimulates lipogenesis, the creation of fat. As such, you're probably under the impression that insulin is probably a negative. You probably think we're trying to control this throughout the day. You probably think it's a good thing to spike insulin post-workout. And this is what the majority of people in the fitness industry believe. Additionally, another misconception is people believe that this therefore means that high carbohydrate diets lead to chronically high insulin levels, and they therefore believe this is not good for fat loss and this is probably going to result in lots of fat gain. However, it's important to note that in healthy individuals, insulin is only elevated during and after the meal. Therefore, again, this is a misconception. Just because you're on high carbohydrates doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have chronically high insulin levels when you're a healthy individual. I think first we just need to understand that insulin is just a normal function within the body. Additionally, it's really crucial that we understand that protein is also insulinogenic. It's not just carbohydrates. As such, this myth of trying to control insulin levels throughout the day is just a moot point, because most of us are going to be consuming a meal containing at least protein throughout the day. Therefore, trying to control insulin is just not worth worrying about, because you're going to get this natural spike during and after the meal when you're having at least protein. It's also really critical that we understand the body is constantly in a state of losing and or gaining body fat. It's more about the net difference at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, where we see any changes in body composition. So basically, fat gain happens during and after meals. This is lipogenesis, and fat loss happens in between meals, which is called lipolysis. So basically, we've got these natural fluctuations when you eat a meal, gain body fat, and immediately afterwards. And then when you're sleeping in between meals, you're actually losing body fat. And it's that net difference at the end of the day. So whether you're in a energy deficit or not over the day, over the course of the week and the month, will dictate those body composition changes. And again, it's just another reason why we shouldn't be concerned with insulin. It's just a normal function within the body. Now, what about spiking insulin post-workout? Well, I've already touched on this to a point, because we know that protein is also insulinogenic, and therefore when we're consuming protein with pretty much every meal throughout the day, we're going to have these natural spikes during the day as well. Additionally, if you have a pre-workout meal containing at least protein 1 to 2 hours prior to the training bout, insulin is going to be above fasting levels during the workout and for several hours after the workout. Therefore, this puts into question whether we actually need those high glycemic carbohydrates to quote-unquote spike insulin. Now, as I've discussed several times on my other podcasts, the reality is we do not need these high glycemic carbohydrates, because protein is going to be 1 to 2 hours prior to training. This will be above fasting levels, and we're going to have at least protein within that post-workout meal. The only time where high glycemic carbohydrates may be necessary is if an individual trains twice per day, so for example endurance training, and having some high glycemic carbohydrate between session 1 and session 2 can be useful. Additionally, with regards to the glycemic index, they're looking at isolation carbohydrates after an overnight fast. This doesn't really represent real life, because obviously when we have fat, fibre and protein within a meal, this blunts the glycemic response. Additionally, there's always going to be nutrients being absorbed from previous meals, again blunting that glycemic response. So as such, putting high glycemic carbohydrates post-workout within the context of a weight training individual that trains once per day just simply is not necessary. However, let your preference dictate whether you have your carbohydrates immediately post-workout and the types of carbohydrates as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Another myth I want to touch on is that fat storage can only happen when insulin is present. This is absolutely incorrect. If you're in an energy surplus over an extended period of time, you will gain body fat. So ultimately, if you were to go on a low carbohydrate diet, yet you're still consuming a lot of calories, a energy surplus via lots of dietary fat, you will still gain body fat. So again, this is another myth of if you just control insulin, you won't gain body fat. It's absolutely incorrect. So what should you be focusing on? Should you be worried about insulin? Absolutely not. Like I mentioned, it's just a normal function within the body. Protein is also insulinogenic, and within healthy individuals, you're just going to get the spike during the meal and immediately after the meal as well. Focus on things that you can actually control, and that is your total caloric intake, that's your macronutrient intake, so protein, carbohydrates and fats, and focusing on measuring your progress and then manipulating these and your training subject to your progress to achieve your goals. It's constantly a case of putting something in place, macronutrient and calorie targets, measuring the progress, and then either tapering and or adding more cardio for fat loss, mainly some higher carbohydrate refeed days when necessary, and you're focusing on slowly, progressively increasing calories in a muscle gain phase. So hopefully that makes sense. The main premise of this podcast is to not worry about insulin, actually focus on the bigger, more important factors that you can actually control. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, if you go to Layton Fitness.co.uk, click a tab at the top of the page called free ebook, and you can download that immediately. I'll teach you how to set calories and protein, carbohydrates and fats for your goals. You can also see the rest of my podcast episodes on iTunes, on my website. I've also got over 100 videos on my website, and you can also learn more about my services and some of the products I have available on there too. So thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care.